if I need.
Okay, Martin. Right. Well, yes, as Helen said, we've got 47 online, so let's begin. Okay. Um, Unfortunately, I haven't met any of the speakers, but I'm delighted to see we've got these four speakers. So we're going to be talking about climate risks and UK crops, nature recovery, the Ouse Washes and their swans, and natural pleasure management today. So we're starting off with John Redhead from
Roger,
yes.
sorry to interrupt. We've got Lewis who's replaced John. John wasn't able to attend. So
Okay,
we
Lewis.
have Lewis Langenberg, who will be speaking about the National Education Nature Park scheme
Okay, and is so,
in the east of
okay.
England.
Well, my agenda's different then. So is that the first speaker then, Lewis?
That is, yes.
Sorry, Lewis. I had an old agenda. Welcome. And so I haven't got it written down. So what? Tell us what you're going to talk about, and off you go.
All right, thank you, Roger. Yes, I think I was a last minute stand-in just last week
Pleased
due
to
to your
see you.
speaker dropping out. So thank you very much for having me this morning, everyone. So my name is Lewis Langenberg, and I work on the National Education Nature Park programme, which is a schools programme, and I work across the east of England, so Peterborough and Cambridgeshire fitting into my region quite nicely. So I'm here to talk a little bit around the programme. So Helen, I'm not sure if you're able to share the slides at all,
Yep, sure. Hang on.
please. Thank you.
Let me just get them up.
Helen's going to share the slides for me just because I'm not sure about my internet connection. I don't want to drop out or you mishear something. So you will get the odd. Can you next slide, please? Unfortunately, but hopefully I'll be able to explain a little bit around the program.
Right, I'm just trying to get out of that side panel. Can you see a side panel on that? Because I want to get rid of that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can. Are you have to put it into slideshow mode?
There we go. Can you see that?
It's not in slideshow mode though.
Not
Ah,
yet.
sometimes it takes. Oh, it's appearing. Huh.
It's okay. I'll start talking and then the visuals can follow suit.
Good idea.
Just to save time. So yeah, so as I said, I work on the National Education Nature Park programme. It is a programme which was born out of the Department of Education Sustainability and Climate Change Strategy, which was published back in 2022. And in that strategy, the DFE has asked that all schools are to have a climate action plan, and the climate action plan has four pillars, and one of the pillars is biodiversity. So that's when they decided to fund the National Education Nature Park programme and asked the Natural History Museum to be the lead partner in that. There are four programmes which are free for schools. There we go, fantastic. There are four programmes which are free to schools which are aligned with the DFE or funded by them. So it's an online portal, sustainability, support for education, national education, nature park, climate ambassadors, and Let's Go Zero. So we're all there to support schools with their sustainability journey. Next slide, please, Helen. I have just popped into the chat as well the strategy if anyone wanted to have a look at that post meeting. So just a little bit of sort of facts and figures for you so far from the programme. So we've got not over 9,000 schools registered across England. And actually, we're now on 1,021 schools in the east of England. So the breakdown, as you can see on the screen for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. We have awarded over £12 million to schools across the country in the last 3 years to change a grey space to a green space or enhance a green space. And over the last 2 years, we've seen 14 schools from mainly Peterborough and a couple from Cambridgeshire. And then in this round of grants, which has just shut, we've seen 7 schools within Cambridgeshire take up that money. So it is all happening locally to you guys as well. So that's an opportunity for the schools to think, what could they do? What biodiversity could they increase across their settings? I will also put another link into the chat for you, so you can have a look to see what schools were eligible and what schools were awarded the money. All they really had to do was apply for the money. There wasn't too many hoops to jump through. They just had to make sure that their numbers added up, which surprisingly enough was a bit of a challenge for a couple of schools, but we got there in the end. So here we go. So it is a free program for schools to join into real scientific research. As I've already mentioned, our lead partner is the Natural History Museum. So we are working really closely with their community science team. The hope is that schools are taking part, they are doing some habitat mapping, they're identifying what habitats they've got on their site, changing some of their sites, which is then all feeding into some data, which hopefully can be linked into the LNRS strategies all up and down the country, to sort of inform what changes are being made across the educational estate. We've also got a range of curriculum linked resources for teachers to be able to access, which I will touch upon at the very end. And the programme is designed for early years right through until colleges, so nurseries through to college age pupils. So we're hoping that we can really generate and really infuse our next round of young people to really consider enjoying nature and taking part in this biodiversity journey, which we're all on. Next slide, please, Helen. So we all have the same aim of wanting to put nature at the forefront for everyone to enjoy its beauty and look after what we have, as it is depleting across the country, as we're all fully aware. We want to develop green skills and young people's digital skills. Actually, it's quite surprising. I think we listen to the news and we hear lots about children spend too much time on technology, but actually when you go into schools and you're trying to get them to use technology in maybe a slightly different way than they're used to, they really struggle. So for example, this week, because it's British Science Week, I spent a day in a school and they were really struggling to sort of get up by naturalist, be able to take the pictures effectively and then be able to upload them. That was a real challenge for them, but we want to hopefully build some of these skills as we move forward. We want to showcase what green careers are out there to open up a wider range of opportunities for our young people. So we don't want to think maybe just out of our traditional jobs, which maybe we all remember. We want to sort of open up and say, look, these are these other jobs out there which you could go into. So I spent a lot of time talking to the students around sort of, we were doing a grassland plant survey. So explain to them about going out there, doing these surveys, how that will then feed into potentially stopping developments happening because you've identified a rare species or endangered species in that particular area, etc., etc. So really want to broaden their understanding and what's out there for them. So the community science team from the Natural History Museum are creating this science paper, which they will present to the DFE to say this is what biodiversity looks like across your educational estate. So all of this, so this is what we're asking all the schools to do, feed into that scientific data to be able to then, for the DFE to say, oh, this is what it looks like. The DFE have a very good understanding of sort of the bricks and mortar, but they haven't got the understanding around what's then actually their site used for, what's going on across the educational setting. And actually some of the schools aren't quite sure what's going on either. So it's a really nice opportunity for staff and pupils to learn together to identify with these habitats across their settings. Next slide, please, Helen. So the programme is designed to have five steps, and this will hopefully give the schools a little bit of a clearer direction on how to follow the programme. And we also want the main thing about it is getting the young people's voices heard. So we don't want it just to be sort of head teachers saying, oh, we're going to plant some trees today. We really want to get that young person's voice in there and get them thinking about what would they like to do and what would they like to take part in. The hope is that they would start with that habitat mapping, so that sort of getting to know your space. So we've got some habitat flowcharts on our website, which they can then go out and then upload onto our map using ArcGIS. Then looking at opportunities for future habitat creation. So this is when I see the LNRS taking part here in terms of looking at what habitats you're hoping to then achieve as a responsible authority of like where your habitat development wants to be. So then schools could then inform some of their decisions, maybe not putting up bat boxes if there's no bat boxes in the area for absolute miles. That's sort of pointless and a waste of money. But actually, if there's another species of animal or wildlife we could help protect, then maybe the schools could then go down that route instead. The idea is then that pupils can then present their ideas to SLT or their sustainability lead, discuss it with other people, maybe put it as like a pupil voice back to their school council, and then make that change happen. As they make that change happen, they can use that online tool to then record that change. So throughout the year, they will be able to see their progression with their steps together. Next slide, please.
Oops.
So apologies, it might be a little bit small for some of you on the screen, but this was just sort of the varying levels of, I suppose, school estate and the engagement with habitat mapping so far. So I think this is a school, one in Essex and one which is in Suffolk. I think it's the East Suffolk Sixth Form College. So you can see the right hand picture is mainly buildings, and that's what predominantly their site is. But they have these very small pockets of grassed areas with some few trees, a few wildflower meadows, and you can just see the other dots there. So we're not saying that you've got to have an amazingly green, luxurious playing field. We're talking about just what does your school look like, and actually these little pockets are then supporting biodiversity. So I know from I worked for the Royal Horticultural Society, and I know from our science team they did some research around actually just having a small pot on a balcony does the same, full of flowers, can do the same as having this rather big garden which is cultivated to an inch of its life. So actually we already want to think small is also good. We don't have to have things on a really big grand scale. So you can see here, so we've got some trees on the left hand side, and a couple of trees in a line, and then some individual trees planted across the site. That school has still got some habitat mapping to go, so they could map their playgrounds, look at whether it's permeable, impermeable, so really bringing in those curriculum links there, and also looking at sort of their school field and identifying what sort of is it just a playing field, or is there an element of wildflower meadow on it. So we can see our sort of two spectrums of engagement, I suppose, from the staff. Some staff are going out and doing the bare minimum, but at least that's a starting point, and we really want to encourage that sort of whole school approach, and in getting other teachers out there as well to then fill in some of these gaps as too. Next slide, please, Helen. Oh, well, I will just put in the link in the chat just for our nature park map, and I will come back and answer any questions at the end. I have got some time to answer the questions I've noticed in the chat, so do bear with me. So I've just popped in the chat the link to our maps. You can have a nose around and see if there's any schools near you, see if they're taking part in the nature park program already. So then, and so lastly, you'll be pleased to know I've nearly finished chatting. So lastly, there are many resources on our website for early years through to college age pupils, and they're all been verified through looking at the right teaching around climate education, because they're going through the Natural History Museum. They go through a very long process of quality assurance as well. And you can see on the screen here, these are just some of the units of learning which early years and up to Key Stage 2, so early years in your primary schools, can access to sort of pick up off the shelf and implement straight into their teaching. Probably some of these lessons and ideas they're already teaching, so it's just about them thinking in a slightly different way. It's like, oh, this links to climate change, this links to sustainability and or biodiversity. So we're really sort of trying to support our schools as much as we can through some of these free resources, and we're working with many different partners as well. So you can see on the screen we're working very closely with Learning Through Landscapes, and we're also been working with the Royal Geographical Society. They've been supporting us in the very beginning of our geography and the ArcGIS, as well as Esri, who's been giving us the map. So we are working with lots of different partners to help support schools and create and support that sustainability and climate change journey. So I will just, my final link I will pop in the chat, which probably I should have started with, but never mind, is just a link to the actual Nature Park website. If you wanted to have a little bit of a peruse and see what's going on, or please do share with any schools which you may be in contact with, and encourage them to take part and join into that scientific research. So next slide, please, Helen, which I do believe is the question slide. So I will happily take any questions, Roger. I don't know if you want me to start with the ones in the chat.
Yes, yeah. Thanks very much, Needless. That was very clear, and I'm sorry to say it was all news to me. I didn't know about this. I've started to work with a local school. We were looking for money to put up some Swift boxes, so I guess that school could apply for Swift boxes, could it?
So the grant schools were selected schools from the DFE around areas of deprivation and green space inequalities. But it would be quite interesting, Roger, if you did have a look at the list, which I did put on the chat, just to see if that school was eligible, and they ignored the communications, because there was a number of schools which didn't take it up.
Okay, Lewis, thank you. Right. So yes, to go to the questions in your chat then. So one from Sue there. I mean, you can see these, Lewis. I mean, asking about greening school grounds, and yeah. Can you see
I
that?
think
Yeah.
yes, yeah, sorry, yeah. So Susan, I'm not sure how people can see it. So the question is, there are a number of groups working on greening school grounds, rewilding, etc. Are these initiatives joining up / working together? You would hope so, Sue. I think is the probably the answer to that. I know that we've been working around with the Wildlife Trust, and other sort of we've been trying to connect with other different groups. We have worked with PEC as well, with Heidi from the schools team. So we are trying to link up as much as we can with other people because I don't want to tread on anyone's toes. I'm actually only funded until next year, so really I really want to be working together and trying to join some of these things together rather than everyone sort of doing their own thing and reinventing the wheel. So I'd hope that people could just come and work together. But yeah, if you know of any ways we can effectively work together, I'd very much welcome so.
Well, if I can just, what I was going to say is that, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on with rewilding. There's Teach the Future, the student-led climate education campaign who are pushing it. There's the National Ecological and Environment Education Group. There's so many groups, and I'm just thinking of the ongoing to maintain the momentum once things get going with schools. You know, they all need to keep pressing on these things, don't they, and helping maintain the interest as new generations of school kids come through.
Yes, definitely. I think with the curriculum and assessment review, which was published not that long ago, that's starting to talk around sustainability and climate change and nature. And the ask is around getting out. Yeah, it is only a little bit, but it is a starting point.
Yeah.
So, and the DFE, so for the Nature Park programme, in the educational estate strategy, the DFE has recognised the Nature Park programme. So we would hope that through these sort of other statutory guidances or guidance from the DFE, we will start to see sort of more nature-based solutions coming through, which will then encourage more schools to continue doing their good work. But I suppose at the end of the day, it's money.
Well, and presumably it helps with this nature GCSE and so on, because you've got stuff in your school grounds. Yeah.
Yes, 100%, especially if you're secondary and you are thinking about doing that natural history GCSE, certainly, but obviously not all schools will access that instantly because that'll be around the experience and knowledge to be able to teach it, unfortunately.
Good.
Yeah, thank you, Sue.
Thanks. Okay, there's another question from Martin Doll here about they ask if you're engaging with colleges in Cambridgeshire or colleges generally, I guess.
In addition, Louis, that was really impressive, pretty clear and really encouraging. The only thing it had a feel to me had a bit more of a school feel in earlier years than for young adults who are, from my experience at Cambridge Regional College and across colleges in the country, are very energized around this agenda, but aren't as engaged through the curriculums they might be in the early years at school. Is that the experience, or are you getting good engagement from the colleges?
I think it's varying, Martin, and I think again it goes back to priorities. So we've got, so in Suffolk you've got one of sort of a college trust who are sixth form trust. They're sort of persevering and they've got a sustainability lead in all schools and they've got this sort of sustainability student group going. Other colleges it might just be maybe your sort of enrichment or a small group or like a nurture group who are running with it. So I think it really varies sort of from central college as such, rather than just sort of your everyday teacher. I know from Essex point of view, Chelmsford College, their director is also a climate ambassador for the Southeast. So he's got a real good passion and sort of infusing his staff with it. So it's encouraging that sort of whole school ethos. But that's not being replicated everywhere, unfortunately.
No, and I could see how it would fit a sixth form college or a college which was predominantly academic, where this was enrichment, as you say, to the main curriculum. But if you're actually in a full-scale further education college, you'll be doing green skills education and preparing people for employment in the sector. So I think it could be an area to look at in the future to adapt in order to meet that requirement also. Yeah,
perfect. I'll take that on board and I will pass that on to our colleagues who are looking at the future of the programme.
As I say, and it's also unreasonably sometimes language has an effect here. If it comes over as feeling schooly, then semi-grown-ups in colleges won't be thinking it's applicable to them. So the language that's used from Department for Education would be helpful here to actually make it more appealing to the older age groups, I think.
perfect. Thank you, Martin.
Yeah,
I'll take that
okay.
on board.
Couple more
Okay, so
questions. How did schools collect and submit data to the map, and how will that feed into national data sets going forward? I guess that begs that question. And will there be another round of grant funding for schools?
Okay, so I'll answer the grant funding one. Unsure yet. So that's and obviously we're going into local elections, so we're sort of hitting that time now where no one could talk about anything, anything from the political scale. So we're unsure what that might look like. We may have information post elections, but at the moment it stands that there is no more funding. But I'll be in touch if there is.
good, thanks.
In terms of the data, oh sorry, Roger, just very quickly, just in terms
Carry
of the
on,
data, just in terms of the data, the schools all sign up to the National Education Nature Park programme. We ask them to complete their site boundaries, so literally just using ArcGIS as one of the activities, just drawing a green line around the perimeter of their site that links to their unique reference number. That then pulls any data which they input within the middle of it. So if they come to do habitat mapping, etc., it can say how much percentage of grasslands and wildflowers. And then we are working with Esri at the moment to create this sort of hub site. So you'll be able to work out your data from each school, and hopefully that will feed into LNRS.
Great, yes. There were two other comments in the chat. I mean, Katie, I guess your question is answered, making the point that making sure the journey doesn't end at primary school. So we've dealt with that. And then Ian makes the point there's good to see a strong link to the LNRS, which of course there is. But and Peter has a question. Peter, you had your hand up. Yeah.
Your reference to showcasing green careers, the local authority people we engage with say they find it difficult to recruit ecologists. So how much success do you have with that?
So we don't so much work with ecologists. Schools can do that themselves, but I think I just don't think there's enough to go round. I think it depends on your where you live as well. I know that for our Yorkshire colleagues, one school had engaged with an ecologist who helped them do their habitat mapping. But I haven't heard of yet of any East of England school who's engaged with an ecologist to get any support. So I think it is sort of an area-based issue.
Yep. Okay, thanks. Any further questions to Lewis on this? I can't see any other hands up unless anyone. No, I've looked at everyone. No other hands up. Okay, Lewis. Well, thanks. That's a very good, clear presentation. And yeah, I shall certainly check the local schools and see if there's any you've connected with this scheme. So thanks a lot, Lewis. That was good.
No, and thank you all for having me this morning. I will stay on just listening, but I will switch my camera off. So thank you.
Okay, great. Right. So, is Sandy next, Helen?
Yes, she is.
Okay, right. So our next speaker is Sandy Skelton from Cambridgeshire County Council, who's going to be talking about a relatively new initiative, nature recovery from the ground up. So over to you, Sandy. Have you got slides?
I do have slides. Hello, everyone. I am
Of
going
course you
to
have, yes. Yeah.
share my screen, see if that works for you.
Yeah.
If I go here, might just take a minute to go into. Are you seeing the full slide view there?
Yes.
That's great.
Fantastic. Okay, perfect. So we'll go with that. So thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm Sandy Skelton. I work for Cambridgeshire County Council. I'm the Community Nature Project Officer, and I work alongside my colleague Stephanie and with Phil Clark, who's the Biodiversity Manager. So I'm going to tell you a bit about nature recovery from the ground up. So the aim of the project is to support communities in Cambridgeshire to prepare community nature recovery plans that are locally meaningful and strategically aligned with the LNRS. There's loads of overlap with the previous presentation, so I'm going to just sort of point that out as we go. I was quite excited by that. So a bit of a timeline where we're at. So the first phase of the project we're looking to deliver by March 2027. We're working with 20 parishes in that first phase as our sort of primary focus. We're about, well, I've been in post for 6 months. My colleague's been in post for a bit longer. And so far, we've been focused on setting up a methodology team around the project, doing a listening exercise with parishes, and then putting together our support offer. So we're basically at the point now where we're just launching the support that we're putting in place with a view to having a year ahead for parishes to put together their plans. On the timeline there, you can see July phase 2 funding decided. That's not an exact date, but this work is funded internally through the Just Transition Fund at Cambridgeshire County Council, and we need to make the case to release the funding for the second phase, which would be a further 2.5 years funding. And that's when, so we plan to do that in July. So it's a co-creation project. So that means that both the overall approach, kind of defining the problem and defining the solution, doing the work, is all very much driven by conversations with the community. We've used this double diamond model as a way to kind of really separate out the different phases of what we're doing. So this idea of having a discovery phase on the problem, where you're kind of finding out what the problem is, but then making sure that we actually sort of define exactly what we're going to focus on, and then develop solutions before moving to delivery. As we've been working on the project, we've actually realised that this is far too linear to describe what we're doing. It's much more of a kind of iterative process, but it is very helpful for thinking about which phase you're in. So not suggesting solutions when you're actually just listening to hear what the issues are for people. So we've done the first round of cluster meetings in parishes across the county. We've met with over 100 representatives of mainly community groups, also parish councils, interested individuals. We did, in this first round of cluster meetings, we did an exercise called an offers and needs market, which was really helpful for kind of surfacing, what people needed, but also showing the depth of nature recovery experience in the county, and the potential for kind of collaborating and offering a platform for peer learning as being a really important element of actually moving this agenda forward. We found really, really strong appetite for collaboration, and also the people wanting to kind of lead, show what Cambridgeshire is doing on nature recovery, delivery of the LNRS, that we're kind of a bit ahead of the game because we happen to have these posts funded at the moment. So demand for this type of support massively outstrips the capacity we've got, which is really exciting. So we plan to focus on 20 parishes for phase 1, so that's to March 27. We have a register interest form, and in addition to those 20 parishes who have all positively responded to being included, we've had a further 37 parishes register interest. Another point to make that's really important that we found through the listening exercise is that this isn't always parish council led. Actually, it's predominantly community led, and so that enabling those community groups to prepare plans, do the kind of thinking work ahead of a plan being adopted by a parish council is a really helpful way to kind of get over this bottleneck of parish council time, because they have, a very full agenda with other things going on. So that's a bit about what we've heard. Bit more detail about, the offers and needs. So we do analyse all the stuff that we get in from the community meetings. This was a sort of post-it note exercise on offers and needs, and we kind of categorise them to see where, what's needed. And here we can see that even though total offers and needs kind of pretty much balanced out, a lot more offers around community engagement, so that ability to reach into communities when when you're actually working with the community groups. And then in terms of the needs outstripping offers around policy engagement. So that's people wanting to engage with highways, with rural estates, and sort of showing the benefit of having this type of work within the council as well. So moving on to kind of the resources that we've put together, there's a whole load of basically what we want to do is provide a platform for sharing what's already out there, and I'll put these links in the chat afterwards. I can't see the chat at the moment in the screen that I've got, so I'll do that in a minute. So we have a web page on the county website, an offers menu where people can put put offers to support community nature groups. So on there, so linked to the previous presentation, this idea of ecologist support for habitat mapping. So there's examples of volunteers offering that. There's example, the Cambridgeshire Scything Network, seminars on behaviour change theory, all sorts of things on that offers menu, and also a form where you can add offers if you have things you'd like to share. Then a resource bank with all sorts of links. So I've written down the links from the previous presentation, we'll add them in. So other initiatives that groups might find useful, funding opportunities log, some guidance, and then importantly, this free access to Parish Online, which is a mapping software that we're piloting across the county for this sort of this 1 year period ahead of us now. So Parish Online is a mapping tool that is currently used by 20% of parishes in Cambridgeshire. They pay, so I think for half the parishes in Cambridgeshire, the subscription is less than £100 a year. And it gives them access to all sorts of reference maps. What we've done is with permission of the CPCA, we've added the LNRS layers to that. We're also talking to the CAM Catchment Partnership, who've done some Blue Lens opportunity mapping that we're going to add, and we've working with CPERC to add the county wildlife site data. That's just for the 20 parishes in the first instance that are in the pilot. We've also added editable layers, so parishes can define community nature recovery projects, engaged landowners, concerns, corrections, so linked to the LNRS layers if there's something wrong when they're sort of ground truthing it. And we can also add collaborative layers. And we have all sorts of kind of guidance documents as well. It's important to say on that point about enabling community groups. So the licensing has to go through the parish councils because the mapping data is on an open government license. But we have a subcontractor contract that means that parishes can pass the license on to community groups and individuals. So the other thing that I just wanted to cover briefly in this presentation is how this all links to the LNRS delivery, because that's, I'm sure other people on the call know more about that than I do, but that is currently being agreed by DEFRA. And so these are the 4 things that are coming out of DEFRA that they'd like to see in terms of LNRS delivery. So about leading and convening delivery. Sorry, the Zoom isn't in front of it. Lead and convene a delivery partnership to plan and prioritise delivery, embed the LNRS into local decision making, identify priority strategic projects, and sort of monitor and report on what's going on. So I am just going to briefly go through how we're kind of contributing to that. Obviously, that's a much bigger piece of work than just this work with parish councils and community groups. But just to sort of show how that contributes. So the three main things that we're doing in nature recovery from the ground up is convening these cluster meetings, providing the mapping tool, and brokering through this shared resource platform kind of knowledge and experience. So with partnerships, we're finding at the cluster meetings connections within parishes. So really, in East Cambs, we had a group from Burwell saying they didn't have connection with the parish council, and then across the other side of the room, a new parish councillor from Burwell saying, okay, let's have a chat. So, even sometimes going outside of the parish, you start making connections within the parish. Connections across parishes, so neighbouring parishes, same catchment, all those kind of connections. Thematic connections, so linked to the last presentation, schools. In Cambridge City, we were talking to the Perth junior school, were saying that they want to do stuff, maybe set up a schools network. Scything, all sorts of kind of thematic connections. The mapping, because we can offer this free mapping tool for the next year. That means that everyone's starting from the same reference layers. We have this ability to kind of share reference layers across organisations, across layers of government, which is, potentially very helpful for kind of building a picture of where these projects, where these community nature recovery plans sit relative to the LNRS. And also engaged landowners, so being able to map those so that people who have some land but maybe don't know what to do can kind of flag themselves for future potential projects. And on the offers and needs kind of brokering support between people who need it and people who want it. So an example, kind of bringing people together. Everyone looks a bit miserable there, but I think it was just the start of the presentation. But those of you from Cambridgeshire will know, a lot of those faces. So you can see the City Council, the Wildlife Trust, the Cam Valley Forum, lots of good people there, climate leaders, all in the room together, kind of having a productive conversation. So embedding the LNRS, that's kind of key to everything we're doing. On Convene, we're doing webinars with our principal ecologists on sort of the parish view of the LNRS. On the mapping, so we've got those reference layers from the LNRS in Parish Online. We have corrections layers to ground truth it, and the projects and the concerns layers. What we've done is we've summarised the actions in the LNRS and grouped them into categories. So that means that those projects and concerns will be filterable by sort of broad LNRS area. And then the guidance documents for preparing a plan, that's very much around setting kind of smart actions that are linked to the LNRS and guided by Lawton principles. So here's an example. So this is the areas that could be of biodiversity importance from the LNRS in Parish Online, and we can see that they have the action codes, and when you click on the area, you can then see what is recommended for that action in that location, and you can see how using this as a starting point would be very helpful for the parishes. So now we're over on to identify priority strategic projects. So again, on Convene, all about peer learning, bringing people together to learn from each other. We've got a huge kind of breadth of starting points across the parishes. We're working with some, miles ahead of us, and some just getting going. So a lot of potential there for peer learning. Then we've got, again, so the projects are going to be strategic because there's this evidence base kind of underlying them. Talked a lot about the LNRS layers, but there's also other reference layers in there. So Environment Agency, Natural England, flood layers, geology layers, those sorts of things that are all really important as well. And then on the brokering, so we're also brokering kind of thematic funding bids. So rather than all these small piecemeal bits of funding, trying to group people together into bigger funding bids, and then wanting to work as we move into this delivery phase more closely with colleagues at county. So this is an example. This is in Reach, the parish councillor in Reach, and my colleague Stephanie and Peter, who many of you will know from East Cambs Can. So this is about, going out and seeing the projects that are being proposed and then building them into the work that the county's doing. We're not moving fast enough for what they want, but, this is also slow work about building connections. We're getting the tenant farmers and the and Wildlife Trust and all sorts of people together and thinking about these funding bids for linear sites. So Devil's Dyke is there and sort of trying to convene that. So last bit on monitoring and reporting. So through all this community engagement work, we have lots of kind of statistics, but also stories, photos, that softer stuff that actually really matters around community engagement. That's important for monitoring and showing the appetite. On mapping, we can we have these maps. We'll have these maps of kind of projects and concerns, filterable by LNRS actions, and we'll also have this engaged landowner map. So a key metric in the LNRS is sort of land managed for nature. It's the Natural Cambridgeshire vision of doubling nature in Cambridgeshire. And so trying to show the land that's managed for nature, including gardens and all sorts of other areas, schools, etc., is really helpful. So that's what we're hoping that engaged landowner layer will do. And then finally on that sort of brokering thing, we'll have again statistics and case studies on projects supported and these kind of collaborative funding bids. So last slide, this is just the example from Duxford. So Ian Waters is kindly going around to all our parish meetings at the moment, showing how he's been using Parish Online. He's our sort of front runner who's already done a lot of this work. This is an area, Duxford, that is largely white in the LNRS. It's not marked as being particularly interesting for nature. But what they've done is they've done this initiative around getting residents to basically have wildlife friendly gardens, and they're logging that on Parish Online. They've got 42 gardens, and this nice thing about how far a hedgehog has to walk between them, and you can see that that's a kind of really nice community engagement sort of tool. And so we don't just see Parish Online as being this thing on the computer, but something where we could print out big maps to take to community events and that sort of thing. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandy. That's all very good stuff. I mean, it's lovely to see all these initiatives contributing for the same purpose to get more nature in Cambridgeshire. So thank you. There's been a bit of activity on the chats. I mean, I think we've dealt with the slides. People who say some of them want slides and with permission they'll be shared. There was questions about are we finding that this works for areas of greater social economic deprivation. I mean, Helen's done a bit of answering there because Helen's actually been put in a bid for Natural Cambridgeshire, which will actually focus projects on that. Helen, do you want to deal with that one actually? Because you put up in
certainly, and I put a little bit of an explanation in the chat. But yesterday, this is a partnership. So Natural Cambridgeshire working with our partners, which includes Cambridgeshire County Council and Peterborough City Council and organisations like PECT, who are doing some really good work with schools and also around the education and nature work generally, with Cambridgeshire Acre, with the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Association of Local Councils, Climate Change Gardening. Who else have we got? Wildlife Trust are on board as well. I may have missed one or two partners off there. But it's essentially to reach those areas of socio-economic deprivation and areas that are most affected by climate change. So the project is intended, it will be county-wide in terms of an offer. So it looks very much like the From the Ground Up, but it is essentially reaching the parts that From the Ground Up doesn't reach. and we've got a whole Cambridge Carbon Footprint, and Imaginariums are built into that as well. So it's £500,000 over 4 years. The lottery seem to like it. We'll have to see when it comes to their scrutiny whether they like it enough to fund it. But it's very much the intention that it, as I say, reaches the parts that from the ground up doesn't reach, and gives that really closer support to that at that frontline community level around the nature connectedness piece, and also working with town and parish councils that may still be at the beginning of their journey on this.
Thanks, Helen. That's great. So there's a few other questions here. So how does this fit with plans Elizabeth may ask this. How does this fit with plans for more housing in Cambridgeshire or in Camp? Do you want to deal with that, Sandy?
So
Bit
I guess
political.
so. Yeah, it's very political. So different ways to deal with that. One is, I guess, working with new development. There is going to be a lot of new housing in Cambridgeshire. You know, we've got the growth company consultation out at the moment. So I guess the way that community nature recovery plans can feed into that process is that through neighbourhood plan, you know, it's a longer game about embedding these things into the planning process. Shorter term, you know, things are about helping. So we've been talking to colleagues about in the permissions team about because there's a lot of these NSIPs, so nationally important infrastructure projects, and so finding out more about the process of how communities can kind of feed into that process, making it clearer about how, you know, how communities can engage. Also on B&G. So we're in response to the questions that we've had around this, we're putting together a sort of series of speakers, very much with a view of how can communities engage with this, so community groups and interested individuals. And the LNRS is there's probably other people on the call who know more than me on the exact wording, but I think it's like it has to be considered in planning decisions, and the LNRS will also be reviewed in, is it 3 to 10 years? So these kind of plans, building up this evidence base locally, will help to inform that as well. So there's a kind of long-term answer, which is write down the plans, get it embedded into the kind of neighbourhood plans, local plans, to influence the sort of planning side of things, and then a shorter term thing, which is about understanding the processes that are happening and how communities can kind of feed into that, and possibly benefit from it in terms of B&G funding as well.
Thanks, Sandy. Peter, you have your hand up.
Those of us who have the most time are those between retirement and Alzheimer's. And of course, it's a big challenge for modern society to make older people feel they have a continuing purpose in life. From your photograph, it looked like you're making an important contribution there.
Yes. The Grey Brigade, well, they're in force, yes.
It is, and it's an important wider point about engaging younger people, and I think that's why. Well, firstly, it's an important point about making use of the expertise that older people have, and actually making productive use of that, and our offers, you know, menu very much reflects that, and that the help that they're offering is hugely appreciated by the groups. I think there's another underlying point about engaging younger people, which is really important. And people talk a lot about children and schools, and then there's also this gap in between. But the reality is that the pressure on sort of, you know, younger people who have children and various other, you know, two parents working, and you know, there are a lot of time pressures as well that I did see a question in the chat about how does this apply to Cambridge, which is important given that I talked a lot about parishes. So is that all right if I just
Yes,
answer that quickly? So we had the second cluster meeting in Cambridge last week, and agreed an approach for the pilot in Cambridge. So Cambridge City has a license for XMAP, which is the same sort of thing as Parish Online, and so we'll have all the same layers, etc. What we've talked about doing is doing a ward level plan, working with Abbey people. So that also speaks to the deprivation point that came up. That's one of the most deprived wards in the city. And then the other thing that came out was it's very much around filling this white space. So the Cambridge City biodiversity strategy at the moment is very much about the kind of city-owned sites, and then the Cambridge Nature Network is very much about these bigger landscape schemes. But there was a real appetite in the room about, you know, how do we fill in these little bits of white space in the middle, and had a really helpful conversation with someone from the Perth Junior School who's keen to put together a network of schools and do basically exactly what the previous presentation was about. So hopefully we can link up and promote that work. And then the third thing that came out of that meeting was I mentioned the collaborative layers. So this is the opportunity to add a layer to kind of show a particular either concern or project across the county. And one that came out from the Cambridge meeting was about rain gardens. That came up both for schools, for also for the new developments. So we had people there who live on the new development, you know, in Cambridge City. And so we're exploring doing a kind of surface flooding map across the county, so that people can show where there's problems with kind of big puddles, and then use that to kind of specify rain gardens and do some outreach work around that. So a different approach for Cambridge City, but sort of trialing different approaches during the course of the pilot, because it is different, you know, to the parishes in the way that it's structured.
Thanks, Andy. Before I ask Helen for a question, there's been quite a lot of chat about, well, some chat about hedgehogs. And I wanted to say something about that as an ecologist, because I've lived in the same house, in the same village for 50 years. When we first arrived, we had lots of hedgehogs. And then now we've got lots of badgers and no hedgehogs. So my point is, I think in all this, you know, people do like to have sort of biodiversity indicators that they're successful. And I think that in some areas, adopting the hedgehog is actually not going to work because of other pressures. But this is the balance of nature in happening. So I think it's very critical that one picks appropriate indicators, because people may be very disappointed if they get the wrong one.
Yeah, it's a really important point, and they call them flagship species, don't they? Where you kind of there's and so I guess for us this has come up, you know. So Swifts is the other one that is talked about a lot. There's is it Peter Tiffin in Bassingbourn who does a lot of work on Swifts, and there's a map, Swift Mapper, I think, and on hedgehogs there's hedgehog high streets. So and that's part of this co-design element. You know, we need to collectively decide whether we want to create these maps separately in Parish Online, you know, whether it's useful to put these things in Parish Online, or whether we should direct people separately to put their stuff in different, you know. So, you know, you could have the schools map on the schools website and the Swift map on the Swift website, or you could try and pull it all together. The what we're trialing over the course of this year is is kind of whether there's a benefit of bringing that all together at the parish level that is seen by parish councillors and in that more sort of institutional way, and that's a question, you know, for this next year to kind of test that out. So any opinions on whether, you know, whether we should be signposting other places or bringing stuff into a single sort of mapping platform would be very gratefully received.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Two more questions before we move on. So, Helen, your hand was up first.
Yeah, it was really picking up on the point about engaging the sort of older population. And I know, Sandy, I know we've had discussions about super volunteers, so people who are really have been spearheading and championing the management effectively of some local nature sites, and the fact that they are feeling that there's nobody coming through to replace them because they're limited. You know, but burnout is a factor, and as we get older, we're just not able to do as much, perhaps as we would like to. So I don't know, Sandy, if you're finding anything about the sort of super volunteers and the how and any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, it came out in when on the needs, it was, you know, one of the top needs was sort of recruiting volunteers, and when we talked in more detail about it, it wasn't just the sort of boots on the ground, heavy lifting type, you know, like show up to the event and do the activity. It was the organizers, the treasurers, the kind of, you know, the people behind the scenes that are doing the core work. So that's very much, you know, come up as a problem. And in terms of, you know, the solution, we are, you know, we're working on it. You know, I guess the whole project is about building momentum and showing the passion, you know, showing the excitement and the joy that there is in this, and so I think that's the challenge, is to, at the moment, we're very consciously engaging with the people who are already the doers, and the next phase will include going out into communities and engaging the wider community. But that was very much a steer from our methodology team, is that not everyone is going to want to do this whole process, you know, go for meetings every 2 months for a year to put together a plan. But once there's a sort of draft plan, trying to get that input into where the passion is and how we can excite people in this to get them involved. So not a straightforward answer, but I think a sort of shared challenge for all of us.
Right, thanks, Andy. Okay, Matthew, have you got a quick point or question, please?
Yeah, it's just picking up the question of the middle aged group. Cambridgeshire Head have a youth advisory group, which was very involved with biodiversity issues in the first stages. It's now doing a lot of work with the Abbey people, but is also very interested in biodiversity. So it might be worthwhile just connecting back up with Dan Thorpe about that, because they're quite keen, and I think that you'd find that a lot of rising employees would like to be engaged and be supported by their companies in doing that.
Yeah,
that's a really helpful point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to work for Cambridge Carbon Footprint, running the Repair Cafe network, and we did work with some local businesses, which was very successful, and we did have I think a younger than average volunteer base for the repair cafes than nationally. So that's a really good point to kind of build on those connections.
The group there, it works for people under 35, so it's kind of employees in that sort of 20s, 30s with children and so forth. So they're a good group, and Dan Thorpe would certainly support it.
Yeah. Okay, I'll follow. I don't know Dan, so I'll follow up about the contact.
Dan Thorpe. Yeah.
Dan Thorpe.
Yeah. I used to work with, I worked for Earthwatch International, and we had a connection with about 27 companies, and they were very, very keen that their workers got involved in these sort of projects. So it's the same sort of thing. I mean, some of those companies are probably in Cambridgeshire, and I don't know. Okay, well, thanks much, Sandy. That was really great, and you've stimulated a lot of discussion. There's even more things going on in the chat we haven't got time to deal with now, but you've certainly stimulated discussion, and there's lots of well done. So thanks for that.
Thanks.
Those of you who thought it was a 90-minute meeting, it's not going to be that, because we've reached the halfway point and we've been going for an hour, which is fair enough, because there've been some interesting discussions and questions, which is part of the purpose of having these forums. So that we're now into the second stretch, and if what's on my piece of paper is correct, we've got Lizzie now. Is that right?
Hello.
Yeah.
Just,
Okay, Lizzie.
yeah, I'll share my screen.
Good. Okay, Lizzie, and you're from the Wildfowl and Wetland Trust, and you're going to talk to us about the Ouse Washes and the Hooper swans, and maybe the other two swans as well, and other things. Who knows?
Yes. Screen. Can you see that screen?
Yeah, that's perfect.
I've lost my other one. Here we go. Right. Okay. So yeah, good morning, everybody. And let me just change. I can't see you while I talk, while I take you through this. But good morning, and thank you for the invite to speak today. So I am going to focus on the importance of these washes for the Hooper swan. So yeah, as I was introduced, my name's Lizzie, and I'm the site manager for WWT Welnley Wetland Centre. So during this presentation, I'm going to provide a brief introduction to these washes, and then we're going to focus on the Hooper swans, taking you through their migration, their status in the fens, and some of their sort of behaviour around feeding, roosting, touch on some of the threats and conflicts that may arise, and then concluding with what their future prospects may be across the washes. So here's a bit of a wintry scene of these washes taken from the air. So these washes, as I'm sure many of you are aware, is an artificial floodplain that was created to store flood water and aid land drainage. These washes were created during the 1600s, providing a direct route to the North Sea for the river Great Ouse. And prior to its creation, the Great Ouse would periodically alter its course. And today the Ouse Washes stretches for 30 kilometres from Erith in the south up to Wellmore Sluice in the north near Downham Market. And it covers an area of 2,400 hectares. These washes provide protection for local villages and neighbouring farmlands across an area of approximately 2,000 square kilometres. And it has the capability of storing 90 million cubic metres of water at any one time. And today the land within the washes comprises about 90% grassland and about 10% open water, seasonal pools, and an extensive ditch system. And this habitat and long-term management of the washes through grazing, hay cutting, etc., has resulted in the Ouse Washes holding a huge number of rare and scarce breeding birds. It has some of the largest assemblages of breeding lowland waders in the UK, and internationally important for its wintering populations of Buick swans, Hooper swans, and is nationally important numbers of wintering wildfowl. And all of this has allowed it to be designated as a SSSI, so a Site of Special Scientific Interest, SPA, so a Special Protection Area, an SAC, a Special Area of Conservation, and a Ramsar site. And today it is jointly managed by the WWT, RSPB, Wildlife Trusts, and the Environment Agency. So moving on to the swans. So here in the UK, we have 3 species of swans in the UK, the mute swan, the Buick swan, and the Hooper swan. And historically, the Buick swans were the one that was once dominant across the Ouse Washes during the winter time. But in the past sort of 30 years or so, we have seen this shift with the Buick swan population declining, and it's also retreating eastwards in response to a changing climate. And what we're also seeing are the Hooper swans have increased dramatically here in the Ouse Washes, and that is also a representation of their population as well as other factors. And we know that there's not a link between these two contrasting trends as to why this change in population is occurring here at the Ouse Washes. So just in case you're not familiar with the Buick swans and the Hooper swans, I'll just show you a couple of images. So the Buick swan is our smallest swan, weighing about 6 kilos. It has a very small amount of yellow on its bill, a bit like a blob of butter, and it can be found breeding across the coast of the Arctic in northern Russia. Whereas the Hooper swan is much larger, similar size to a mute swan, with a large wedge-shaped, mostly yellow bill, a bit like a wedge of cheese. And the ones that we have here in the UK during the winter all breed in Iceland. And they are very vocal, and you'll often hear them when they are feeding or flying across the landscape. So this is just an image showing the migration route of GPS tagged birds from Iceland, which shows that Hooper swans will migrate southeast to Britain and Ireland. They have these two principal departure routes, one from the southwest and one from the southeast, and they will migrate on a broad front. But there are a small number of Hooper swans that will remain in Iceland throughout the winter. The swans will primarily enter Scotland and head down the east coast, but some will enter Ireland and cross the country to the Humber estuary and then down the east coast until they meet us here at the Ouse Washes. And they will remain around the Ouse Washes until March and into April, but cold fronts and favourable tailwinds can provide rapid influxes, and conversely, if we have a mild winter, many may delay or shorten the stay with us. And this use of tracking data and colouring data has also demonstrated that many of these Hooper swans do demonstrate really strong site fidelity, with many returning in successive winters. And whilst here, the birds can commute between the Ouse and the Nene Washes in response to food, flooding, weather and disturbance. But what we do know is the Ouse Washes acts as both a base and a regional hub for these Hooper swans. So since the 1980s, what we are seeing is that the Icelandic population of Hooper swans has increased steadily from 16,000 individuals up to 43,000 as of the last census in 2020. We've actually just completed the latest census this winter, and so hopefully this year we'll have updated population numbers for Hooper swans, and it's likely that this population has continued to increase. And as you can see from this graph, the Hooper swans used to occur in the Ouse Washes in very small numbers. You know, there would only be about 500 individuals. And in recent years, our winter counts are showing that this is rocketed to now peaking at over 14,000 individuals across the Ouse Washes. And so today, the Ouse Washes now holds about 21% of the wintering population, and it's about 57% of the English wintering population. Whereas in contrast, as you can see, Duick swans have fallen from a peak of around 7,000 birds to fewer than 250 individuals. So how do we monitor their breeding success? So breeding success is monitored through the Goose and Swan Monitoring Programme, which has been in existence since 1978. And this is a partnership between the BTO, JNCC and Nature Scott. And what we have found that between 1981 and 2020, the proportion of youngsters here with us in the Ouse Washes can vary from about 8.8% to up to 22.6% of the Hooper swans around the Ouse Washes are youngsters. So this picture just shows couple of the youngsters. They're a lot grayer and they haven't yet got their yellow bill. We generally have a lower percentage of youngsters in the Hooper swan population than, say, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And this pattern is likely a reflection of their migration distance. Successful breeding pairs will often remain closer to their breeding grounds of Iceland, reducing the amount of time that they have to travel for their youngsters, and allows them to get back to Iceland, find the best territories ahead of the breeding season in the spring. So therefore, what we do find is that the Ouse Washes has a disproportionate higher population of failed breeders, non-breeders or younger adults. But what we have also found through monitoring the breeding success is that higher survival of all age classes is found when they winter inside nature reserves such as the Ouse Washes. So this data isn't absolute data. This is based on field workers in the winter months counting doing an age assessment of the flocks of swans in the landscape. So what are the birds feeding on when they come to us? Well, as we're all familiar with, the Fens comprises one of the UK's most intensively farmed landscapes, where we're dominated by cereal crops, sugar beet, oilseed rape, and potatoes. And since the 1970s, we have seen that this highly productive farmland has provided an abundant supply of food for these wintering swans. So it's likely that as a result of some of these interannual fluctuations in flooding on these washes and a negative impact this has on their naturally occurring vegetation that they like to feed on, swans have been prompted to switch to feeding on the farmlands where there's an ample supply of high energy crops. And they'll favour these cereal crops and sugar beets, oilseed rapes and potatoes. And during periods of prolonged flooding, we have found that the swans will spend a greater portion of time out on this arable land. Conversely, when we do have periods of moderate flood, they will spend more time on the washes grazing. And again, using field observations and GPS technology, we are finding that the majority of the swans are feeding within a 17-kilometre radius of the Ouse Washes, with the openness of the fens providing an excellent visibility to ensure that they can detect predators early. However, obviously, agricultural practices are changing. Sugar beet harvesting is becoming more efficient, for example. And so as these practices change, we may see some subtle changes in distribution and feeding behaviour of whooper swans. For example, they may need to move further away from the washes, or they may switch to alternative crops. So therefore, continued monitoring will be important for us to understand any shifts in future use of the fens. So the swans will spend the majority of their day out on the arable feeding, and then at night they will come back to these washes where they will roost. And this is the sort of their daily rhythm of life. So the Ouse Washes provides an ideal nocturnal refuge for these birds, offering extensive shallow expanses of water with minimal human activity. But what we have seen is that recent tracking data, again through GPS technology, has shown that the roosting behaviour is becoming much more flexible than previously assumed. We are seeing that farm reservoirs are becoming of increasing importance and often holding significant numbers of international numbers, really. So whilst the Ouse Washes is a protected landscape, farm reservoirs are unprotected. So research is showing that it's really important that we start maintaining this network of suitable open water roosts across the wider fens, ensuring that these birds do have safe alternative roost sites when flooding, when we have this significant flooding on the washes, or where there's ice or disturbance may render the washes less suitable for them. And we are also seeing that roost choices may vary according to feeding distribution as well. So these species, whooper swans are highly adaptable to sort of local conditions. But what we also know is that roost fidelity can be strong and that they will keep returning to the same roost sites. So swans, when they come, there are many threats and conflicts that whooper swans can encounter around. So here in the fens, power lines are research through post-mortem has shown that the primary cause of death of whooper swans in the Ouse Washes are the power lines. The whooper swans, as you'll know, will fly low across the landscape between feeding and roosting areas. And so we work in partnership with the RSPB and UK Power in installing deflectors across the network, which is what you can see in this photo. And the team in UK Power are really passionate and really dedicated around ensuring that as many, where possible, these pylons, power lines can have these deflectors fitted. And we do know that once they are fitted, this does significantly reduce swan collisions. And also through long-term post-mortem examination, disease also plays an important cause of mortality. In recent years, the most frequently identified cause has been a disease called necrotic enteritis, and historically lead toxicity, but thankfully the latter has declined locally. and has not been recorded as a primary cause since about 2017. So necrotic enteritis peaked in about 2018. The swans are obtaining this disease through the eating of potatoes. So this actually led to WWT changing how we do some of our supplementary feeding, as we did go through a period of time provisioning them with potatoes here at Welney. So we have now stopped that activity. However, this disease will likely remain. So it is important that we continue to monitor, ensure we favour natural food sources and continue that long-term monitoring of them. And sadly, this winter, the Hooper swans also experienced an outbreak of highly pathic avian influenza, which had led to a notable impact when birds first arrived with us in October and November time. Thankfully, we have seen, as the water levels rose and birds could be dispersed across the landscape, we did see this decline, avian influenza decline in the population. However, the full impact on the population will not become apparent for some time, as effects on survival and return rate may only emerge in subsequent years. So that's why we need to continue our surveillance, carcass reporting, and collaboration between agencies and conservation organisations, so we can continue to track the progression of this disease and inform future mitigation measures. Agricultural conflict is potentially a conflict within the landscape. Talking though with local farmers around here, many of them really welcome the swans, and if they nibble away on their winter wheat, that's great for them. It actually helps the winter wheat keep growing into spring. It's just whether if the fields are too wet and they get trampled, it's less favourable, and they'd prefer them not to eat the oilseed rape. But generally, the swans can live in harmony with agriculture. And then the final one I've listed for today is hydrology. So the Ouse Washes is primarily managed as flood management, and this is the overarching sort of management of the washes, and this can occasionally conflict with our conservation aims. Earlier or prolonged flooding may reduce access for grazing and roost security, and insufficient flooding can actually reduce roost area, and when the river levels are high, we are more likely to see some of these swans go to alternative roost sites. So what are the future prospects of Hooper swans around the Ouse Washes? So it generally remains positive. While we know climate change is influencing behaviour of migratory water birds, we are seeing that Hooper swans have not yet exhibited any change in their migration. Milder winters and reduced duration of freezing in Iceland may result in greater variation in the population of Hooper swans in the Ouse Washes and across Britain. Hydrology, so we may see that we need to continue to have those close collaborations between partners to try and ensure we can get the best out of the washes for flooding and for nature. Then landscape connectivity. So Ouse Washes are the heart of the fens when it comes to Hooper swans, and as the population continues to expand, birds are likely to be using a broader landscape mosaic, including new feeding areas and roosting areas, which we are seeing them spread up into Lincolnshire now. This expansion could actually enhance the population's resilience, so it will be therefore really important again to start monitoring the satellite sites to ensure that they are recognised and managed appropriately. So in conclusion, the Ouse Washes, with its combination of extensive open water, reliable feeding opportunities and strong conservation management, does secure its role as a premier wintering site for this species for years to come. And the presence of thousands of Hooper swans each winter remains both a conservation success story and a powerful reminder of how the interdependencies between people, agriculture and wetlands in the fens. So thank you very much for listening. Happy to take any questions, and I will just stop sharing so I can see you all.
Thanks very much indeed, Lizzie. Yes, it's a wonderful spectacle to see all these swans on the washes. So if anyone has not been there yet, I strongly suggest it's worth a visit. There's been some things. There's a comment in the question rather in the chat about lead. Where's the lead come from? Well, I think as we know whether Lizzie, do you want to answer that one? I think I know the answer myself. But yes, two things I'd like to know is where does so the question in the chat, where does the lead come from that poisoning the swans? And also I'd like to hear more about this. You made quite light of the potential conflict with the farmland, and I was a bit surprised at that. I wonder if anybody listening has any contra views to that. Okay.
Well, lead. So first of all, lead. So that historically would have come from wildfowling in lead shot, but lead shouldn't be used on fresh in water now, which is why lead poisoning has dropped in mortalities for Hooper swans. It's still a problem on the continent for Buick swans, so WWD does still do lead monitoring. But yes, we just need to continue to campaign for lead to be banned in shot.
This campaign has been going for years and years and years. I mean, to my knowledge, 30, 40 years. I mean, where are we with the campaign to stop using lead? Does anyone know?
There has been there is progress making, but obviously it's changing people's minds to alternatives, which are deemed less.
Yeah. Because they're finding, I mean, not only lead poisoning birds, but it's poisoning us because the Consumers Association have been looking at lead in game products in supermarkets and finding even the so-called lead-free full of lead as well. And this is partly because when you're shooting game, people are still using high velocity with those sort of dum-dum leads that split open. So it's a problem. I mean, I worked on a estate where we changed to using tungsten instead of lead. But I think the solutions are there. I'm just disappointed as an ecologist that we can't solve this one. Okay, the other thing was agri-environment conflicts. You said this is all lovey-dovey, Lizzie. Is it really? Anybody online? Oh, John Shropshire's online. Sorry, John, to put you on the spot. What's your view on this, swans?
We agree that if they come and graze in the winter on winter wheat, that's probably more of a benefit than a problem.
Fantastic.
I did put into the chat actually whether there are any cover crops that could be recommended that would be good for grazing, because now with the SFIs and environmental schemes, farmers are moving to more regenerative practices, so there's a lot more cover cropping in the winter. I wonder whether there's one that might suit the swans.
That's very interesting. Yeah. Why does swan nibbling benefit winter wheat? Is it just stimulating it or stimulating growth or what?
Particularly in the fen, actually, it can be too rampant. If you can get too much leaf, and get too long in the stem by the spring. So anything that actually controls it a little bit. So you'll notice the farmers are all rolling their wheats now, crump rolling it to actually sort of firm it down, hold it down.
Fantastic. That's really interesting.
We do actually graze some of our wheats in the winter with the sheep.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, even that, but swans would be better probably. Seeps would do more damage with trampling.
That's great news. I'm pleased to hear that. Any other questions? I can't see any hands up, but what's in the chat? There's a question there from Liam. So do you want to pose your question, Liam? Shall I read it out? How much of the decline?
I'll speak. So how much of the decline is related from HPI through analysis of dead birds?
Well, so Hooper swans are increasing, but the AI, I don't know, we won't know the impact of AI for maybe until next winter or the winter after.
So do you do analysis on the birds through PCR tests and pathogens? Because I was working in Antarctica with penguins and they do it by day analysis.
So we do we do record swan mortality We don't necessarily have, not all birds will get tested because of APH. It may not all, not all birds get tested. So we work with partners, and ours we just test on a kind of make the assumption that if you have a dead bird that's tested positive, we'll leave it so many days, and then if you see new dead birds, then you test again. So we don't test every bird because there isn't the capacity for every dead.
So there's no data relating to that in terms of actual figures.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Right. There's Stephen Tompkins asked a question about, he says, do we have time to ask about the reason for the collapse in Buick numbers? I think you partially covered that, Lizzie, but what's the actual real reason?
So there's a couple of things for Buick swans. So one, the European population as a whole has actually declined by about half since 1995. So they're having like low breeding success, and obviously changes on their breeding grounds. And then in terms of the numbers in the UK, that's the distribution of the population is changing. So with milder winters, why migrate further than you have to when it's takes a lot of energy. So a lot of them are staying in Germany. So Germany's becoming more important for Buick swans, and they're seeing theirs increase. But yeah, they're also suffering from low breeding success.
Yeah. So there's two factors there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Lizzie. Well, I think we'll need to move on now. So thank you very much indeed, Lizzie. That was really good and really interesting, stimulating. And I've learned a few things from that, which is always useful. We now move from a site which is supposed to naturally flood, the Ouse Washes, although I think ecologists would like to control the flooding better to suit the wildlife that uses the washes, but that's another point. We're now moving to an area where people don't want it to flood. So we're talking about the Alconburys, and Charles Dalleywater, so well named, is going to talk to us about natural flood management. Charles.
Yeah, let me just get this going. So thank you very much for having me. Good morning, everybody. Is that right?
Yes, that's perfect.
Yeah, brilliant. Good. Okay. Yes, good morning. So I'm from the Alconbury Brook Flood Group, and my topic that I've been asked to talk about is, does NFM work? And so I'm interested in any benefits that I can get for flood management, for nature recovery, and for agriculture. So any opportunity that comes along in the catchment that brings me one or more of these, then I get interested in. And of course, I'm also interested in value for money. So here we go. This is what Alconbury looks like on a bad day. This is 1998, 170 homes at risk, well, 180 homes at risk nearly, and we've had 20 floods in the last century. So we regard this as a little bit of an emergency, and it's something that we're working on to solve. What I want to tell you about to start with is how we've set ourselves some targets. Now it's worth saying there's about 70 of us. We set out as complete rookies. We've had a lot of help and assistance from folk in the Environment Agency, from the local flood authority, and from lots of other places who've helped to get us going. We've done a lot of learning ourselves. One of the areas of learning has been data collection and understanding what's going on in the catchment. It was fairly poor, to be honest, when we came along. So we've put in our own telemetry system. We do soil moisture, we do flow, we do oxygen, we do sediment, we do rainfall, and so on. And we've got sensors across the catchment now that are helping us to understand exactly what's going on. So the graph here shows flow a few weeks ago in the catchment. The orange line is flow, and the blue line is depth. The top left-hand side is a little Chinese flow sensor that costs us about £500. So actually, we've found because it's been us working as an independent group, we've been able to find quite cheap alternatives in terms of collecting lots of data. So the other thing that we do is we've taught ourselves to do modeling with various software packages, and we're forever collecting eyewitness accounts. Whenever there's heavy rainfall, we want to know what's going on so that we can add that to the data that we're using and the understanding that we've got. So this is a piece of software that's called HECRAS. We use another one called Scalgo, which allows us to measure individual small catchments when we're looking at the potential areas for new ponds or existing ponds. So this is the catchment. It stretches from Huntingdon into Northamptonshire at the top, nearly to Peterborough, and nearly to the A14 in the south. So it's 80 square kilometres. So, and unlike the rest of Cambridgeshire, it's quite hilly and it's heavy clay. So the hydrology is completely different from the rest of Cambridgeshire, apart from a few little patches around the south of Cambridge. And mostly it's mixed agriculture. Arable over on the or to the north, it's mixed farming with cattle and arable, and the rest of it is mainly arable. So just to give you an idea of scale, and this is nothing in comparison with Ouse Washes. I think compared with the Ouse Washes, the amount of water we're talking about is 0.3%. So it's tiny, but it's one catchment, and it all flows through a couple of or three villages, and so it's big enough to cause us some problems. So just for comparison, 1 million cubic meters of water is 400 Olympic swimming pools, just to help you imagine the scale of the problem that we've got. 10 millimeters of rain across the whole of this 80 square kilometer catchment is 0.8 million cubic meters. 32 millimeters of rain is just over 2.5 million cubic meters, and that's the crunch figure. 32 millimeters of rain, so bear that one in mind. So the problem with 32 millimeters of rain is it starts coming in through people's front doors, and of course that's not that's a pretty rough and ready figure, because rainfall intensity, the conditions beforehand and so on all affect that. But from a standing start on saturated soil, 32 millimeters of rain and the first front door has got water coming through it. So how do we, and also, so from the modeling and from the telemetry that we've got, we know that 32 millimeters of rain is 15 cubic meters per second flowing through the villages. So we can model that using HECRAS, and then we can talk to Nick, who lives at the first house to get flooded, and we can say, we've had 32 millimeters of rain, Nick, and our modeling shows we've got 15 cubic meters per second. Where did it come to? And Nick says it nearly came in, nearly came in. So we use this triangulation to try and understand what's going on. So one of the key things that we're interested in, because we're really interested in soil as a source of flood mitigation, is that if we've got saturated soil, we've got this 32 millimeters of rain, and we know the amount of flow that we get past Alconbury. Alconbury starts to flood about 8 hours after the peak rainfall. So we know the amount of water that's going to come past Alconbury, which is 129, which is 1.29 million cubic meters. Out of the 2.56 million cubic meters of rainfall, we know that the runoff rate is about 50%. So one of our targets is to increase soil porosity by a number of methods from 50%, which is where we are at the moment, to less than 45%. So soil is one of our NFM approaches. So if I just show you, these are the houses in Alconbury, and what we're trying to do is to reduce the peak, is to spread the peak flow. So this is standard, flood mitigation method to spread the flow over a couple of days rather than have the peak flow between hour 8 and hour 32. So to give you an example, the 1998 flood, which is a 1 in 100 year occurrence, we had 60 millimeters of rainfall. If we take the amount of rainfall and multiply it by 50%, then we know how much rain was actually trying to get through the villages. We know what the daily allowance is that will stop it going in through people's front doors. So the intervention we need to do is to somehow retain just over 1 million cubic meters of water upstream for about a day. So that's the scale of our problem. So here we go. We have very roughly divided that into thirds. So the first one is to build freshwater and watercourse interventions. And that amount of water equates to about 200 medium-sized ponds. The second one is increasing soil porosity. So increasing the amount of water that soil will hold. And our target is 4.6 millimeters of rainfall. And so that gives us the second third. And the other third, we're leaving to our colleagues in the Environment Agency, who are looking at improving conveyance away from the villages. So here are some successes. So so far we've built 23 ponds, or 23 assets of this sort. And we've also built some, Sandy, we've also built some rainwater gardens. So, and these are typical. Here's the top left-hand one is an online pond. You can see there's quite a large ditch coming in from the top. There's a dam at the bottom. And we've created this area of fresh water. We agreed this is a fairly hopeless bit of farmland because this is a triangular field, and this is the acute angle of the triangle. You can't turn a machine round in this, so it was fairly easy to persuade the farmer to let us have this. The large yellow one at the top, that's a scrape. There's a large ditch that we call Buckworth Brook running along the left-hand side. That's now a damp meadow. And it was fairly early days. We were very lucky, but actually the water pours into that damp meadow at roughly the same time that it pours into the Alconbury villages. So we by chance, before we knew as much, we got that one right. The bottom left one is 16,000 cubic meters of water. It's already getting wildfowl finding it, and we've already done some carbon sequestration testing of the bed and discovered that, or we're measuring the amount of carbon that we're storing in that pond compared to, so we're trying to do a life cycle analysis compared to, for example, the amount of diesel that we had to put into digging it. The other two are restorations. So these So another good target for us is to talk to farmers about derelict ponds. They used to be horse ponds before mechanization and before the Second World War. So they've often become completely silted up. You can tell that they're a horse pond because they've got a ramp, which is where they led the horses when horses were used for agriculture. So finding farmers who will let us restore their horse ponds are great targets. John, you've seen one of our horse pond restorations, I think. So this is not a horse pond restoration, but this is just to illustrate that it doesn't always work first time. So this is a nice big pond that we've built near a village called Gidding. It's a tiny pond. Well, this was already a sort of a scrape, but it didn't work properly. And the water just poured out of the end over the field in the top part of the picture and damaged about 10 hectares of crop nearly every winter. So this pond is not quite large enough, unfortunately. So we got to 25 millimeters of rain, and then it started to pour over the edges. So we are doing some modification to this pond this winter, but we're also, again, reseeding the area to the right-hand side with a damp meadow, with a deep-rooted damp meadow mix, and planting some trees on the right-hand side. We've got a team of people who are looking at water quality and measuring the occurrence of a range of invertebrates. We've got a 5G camera on this site. We're doing acoustic monitoring for birds. We're doing acoustic birdsong monitoring on quite a number of our sites in order to measure the impact on biodiversity. And from our point of view, we're doing flow measurement, and we're also doing downstream, we're doing sediment measurement in the ditches downstream to see if this has had an impact. Sediment is a major problem in the Alconbury villages where the brook's been heavily modified because sediment drops out of the flow and creates berms in the brook that then resist flow. So this one, it certainly reduced flood flows, but unfortunately it filled up too much and water still continued to come out of the banks once we got to 25 millimeters of rain. So our strategy for this winter is to just enlarge it a tiny bit. We've also got a thing called a snorkel in this pond. So the water leaves the pond through a sediment trap, which allows the sediment to settle in the pond before it leaves the pond. And this is a really good example of the fact that there are no rules really for NFM, and a lot of it is experimental, and we're learning from our mistakes as we go along. Fortunately, we've got the opportunity to do that. This is another pond where we've learnt mistakes. We've got 7 interventions on this major ditch that carries about 10% of all of the water that ends up in the Alconburys. So all of these interventions, a number of them are ponds, some of them are meanders and leaky dams and that sort of thing. So this is a lovely pond. Just out of sight on the right-hand side, there's a dam, and unfortunately the dam breached underneath it. And so we have learnt quite a lot about dams from this from this experience. And again, it's, as far as we're concerned, we're learning all the time. Let me just tell you a little bit about the work that we're doing on soil. So the sorts of inputs that we've got, we're looking at organic material, we're looking at compaction management with farmers, we're looking at biostimulants and phosphite, we're looking at cover crops, min-till. These are all the inputs that we're looking at to see whether or not they have an impact on soil porosity. We're looking at deep-rooted varieties. And we've got a number of farms where we've got deep-rooted SFI crops, where we've got trials, and we're also looking at microbiome. So we look at the microbiome, we're able to sequence soil DNA to look at the biodiversity in the soil. We're able to look at the acoustic birdsong monitoring that allows us to also to measure the biodiversity as a measurement of impact of the things that we're doing. So what we found is that we're starting to discover those factors that provide improved yields, because they're the ones that are going to persuade farmers to adopt the ideas that we've got. We're also looking, of course, for improved porosity, and from an environmental point of view, which is where most of our funding comes from, we're looking at ways of reducing pollution and improving soil health and carbon capture. So just almost to finish off, here's some of the work that we're doing. The plants at the top, the rape plants at the top. On the left-hand side, you've got lovely rape plants that have been treated with phosphite, but haven't had any phosphate additive. For 3 years, the farmer's not used phosphate for 3 years. On the right-hand side, you've got plants that have been treated with phosphate, same type, and you can see that the roots are diminished. If I just go back to the last slide, we've got this wonderful program called Rhizovision, which is the sort of multicolored thing in the middle. We take photographs of the roots, and we can measure the surface area and the volume of the roots just using this AI program. The other thing that we've been using deep-rooted formulations, and especially when also using biostimulants, including something called trehalose 6-phosphate, we're finding that we're getting deeper roots, more lateral roots as well, and that we are increasing soil porosity, but we're also increasing yields as well. We're understanding the microbiome that's associated with porous soil and the factors that affect the microbiome, and how we can recruit guilds of bacteria into the soil that not only increase porosity, but also increase yields and soil health. So the picture at the bottom, or the chart at the bottom, is the bacterial biodiversity in different conditions that we've been looking at recently. So the bar at the bottom is badly compacted soil. The third bar up is around 3 recently planted oak trees. Then we've got the second bar up is lightly tilled soil. Then we've been particularly looking at oak trees because it's just a really convenient plant to look at. And as you increase the age of the oak tree that you're sampling from, then you're getting increased microbiome biodiversity. The thing I'd say about 3-year-old oak trees is the way that people plant trees often, which is to cut a B-shaped wedge and then put the bare root in the ground, and then stomp it in with the heel of their welly. And of course, until you've actually got a canopy on the tree and you're putting some organic matter into the soil around the tree, you've actually got compacted soil that doesn't help biodiversity, or the microbiome biodiversity doesn't help the fungal biodiversity either. Just to finish off, I really, can't end without saying that we haven't done this without an enormous amount of help. We have a charity, we have a lot of support within the community, lots of volunteers, 36 farmers who work with us. So we have regular meetings with farmers. There's the picture on the right-hand side is one of our meetings. We generally get about 20 people along to those. People within the EA and DEFRA, people within the local flood authority, the community foundation, parish councils. The list is endless, the amount of help that we've had. And thank you all for listening to me and having me today.
Well, thank you, Charles. That was most interesting. I mean, fantastic. I congratulate you on what you've been doing. It's good to see, all this effort and all this collaboration. Really good. There's been quite a lot coming up in the chat. Katie Teasdale Ward suggests you might like to speak to the East Mercia Rivers Trust. They're doing some interesting work with around Links and Horncastle about NBS and restorations. So she's happy to make an introduction. There's a question which I was going to ask as well, but someone else asked as well. You've got 200 ponds and you've done 20, so 180 to go. How are you going to do this, and where are you going to get your money from? I have a personal interest in ponds because I work with the Amphibian Reptile Conservation Trust, who are always looking for new ponds. I mean, because amphibians have declined, as you said, a lot of ponds have vanished. But so, are you in touch with groups like that to help funding?
Yes, so we've been very fortunate that FWAG funded one of our ponds, the Wildlife Trust funded one of our ponds. One of the ones in one of the pictures that I showed you earlier was funded by FWAG, and they've subsequently done their eDNA monitoring and found evidence that great crested newts have moved in, which is great. We get money from E.ON through the Community Foundation. We get money from DEFRA, I'm pleased to say, who are looking at us as a sort of a case study. And it's likely that funding's going to go on for 2 or 3 more years. The local flood authority have given us bits of money, district council, national highways. I mean, we just, part of my role and other people in the group is clearly the sustainability of the project is just to go hunting for money all the time. Even sort of Waitrose gave us 500 quid because lots of people put counters into a box in St. Ives. I mean, all of that counts. Obviously, all really important.
Yeah. Yes. I put my counters in that box as well, Charles.
Did you? Thank you very much.
Can you take your presentation down so we can just see more of the audience, please? More of the
yes. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
That's okay. No. I'm just looking what else there is in the question. Does anyone have a question? Sorry, I'm looking for hands up. I can't see any hands up. What else is in the chat there? Oh yeah, someone is. There's a suggestion here that goes to riparian and wet woodlands, slow flows. Are you thinking of using woodlands at all in this?
Yes. You will understand from my initial remarks that we regard this as a bit of an emergency, and that the work that we've been doing indicates that woodlands contribute quite slowly to flood mitigation. But we have got some sites. So we have been planting trees as a group. That's the first thing. We've been planting trees as a group. And on all of the sites, we look for the opportunity to plant trees. We're experimenting with different planting methods in order to try and get firstly to give the trees a better start, but also to get more impact from our point of view from the tree planting that we're doing. I guess we've planted about 1,000 trees so far. There are one or two places in the catchment that lend themselves to wet woodland creation.
are there any particular what trees do you favour, Charles, for planting in this situation? What species?
Well, I mean, there's the obvious ones like ash and willow.
Yeah.
But we've got a farmer colleague who has planted 11 hectares as a new woodland. Some of that is going to be wet woodland. We've put a pond right in the middle of the wood where there's an area of sort of runoff that's preventing the trees from thriving. So he's got 3,000 trees that he's planted at Great Gidding, and we have another wood nearby where we've got 25-year-old trees, wide variety. So that gives us an opportunity to, without having to do a longitudinal study, of having two bits of woodland of different ages to see what the impact is.
Fantastic. Can you pop in a few black poplars as well, please?
Yes, yes. I've got I love those, and so we have a small farm, and we put black poplars in.
Great. Okay. We're running up to the end of the meeting. Any other questions to Charles about this fantastic project? No, I think you've said it all, Charles. I mean, we are in awe of what you're doing, and just wonder how you manage to coordinate all these 70 people to these volunteers. But it's a really good project. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
And thank you.
Okay, well, just to say, to close the meeting, we did use the 2 hours, and I think that was necessary. We've had 4 really interesting presentations and some very interesting discussions, and some jolly good stuff in the notes as well. So it's nice to see people offering connections and things between what they've heard. So that's all I've got to say, really. So thank you all, and we will have another partnership forum in due course. I think there's a date in the diary. Helen, Peter, is there a date in the diary for the next one?
10th of June. 10th of June. I was just looking behind me. It's on there.
That's right. Yeah, 10th of June. Okay, so that's the next partnership meeting. We don't think we've got an agenda for it yet. But
no, but if anybody wants to offer their services to speak, do get in touch. Peter is our programmer. Peter Lanzoff.
Yeah. Anyway, and a special thanks to Helen and Peter, who are the people who really sort of pull this all together. So with that, I wish you all adieu.
Many thanks.
Thank you.